before the sky bled into any color at all, before the cook fires in the kitchens coughed up smoke and the kennels raised a bark. He was awake, lying on the pallet in the straw by Ghost's flank, listening to the very old sound of Winterfell breathing. The stones had a way of holding the night's cold and speaking it back to dawn. A drip from a crack in the wall where snowmelt collected, a wind sigh slipping through arrow loops, the soft, almost ceremonial drip from eaves to flagstone as frost surrendered along the roof's edge. The horse in the stall on Jon's left shifted and blew out a breath through velvet nostrils. The straw close to his cheek smelled of dust and fodder and the faint animal musk that clung to everything out here. He could feel the warmth from the dire wolf without touching him. He had learned precisely where the heat began when your hand hovered above that thick white pelt. Ghost opened his eyes and turned his head. In the dark, they had no color, only a thinning of shadow that found him without strain. Jon reached without looking and touched the soft fur along the wolf's neck, his fingers sinking and then sliding until the tips met skin and the skin warmed them. "I know," he whispered into the dim. Sometime in the night, the last of the traveling folk had pitched fresh hay before the mangers, the quiet rhythm of a castle that went no less steady for grief or for kings. The straw crunch under Jon's shoulder framed his thoughts. It would be today. The carts and sledges and wagons would groan their way out of the gatehouse. The king would be far enough to seem like a story again. Lord Eddard would ride south with daughters in honor, and Jon, by every word spoken and every look pressed into him these last days, would ride north with his uncle and take sworn words against the life he was leaving. He had told himself the decision was already done, only the doing remained. And yet the doing. Small things, shoes on, saddle checked, a leg swung across a horse, had become suddenly vast. He would not think of Bran, he told himself, and then thought of his brother until the thoughts were a fog he could not see around. He had not been allowed to go back to the tower room, to the bed where Bran lay quiet as deep water. Catelyn's voice at the threshold had been almost without volume and nonetheless sharp as broken ice. Her words had been about fear, but they had sounded like hate. The memory drove him up on his elbow now, as if the straw had turned to a bed of nettles. Ghost rose with him, one smooth motion, a ripple of strength, and shook. Dust motes lifted and turned in the slant of light where a doorway's crack let in the first smear of morning. Jon got to his feet. His breath made little ghosts of its own as he spoke the day's first lie to himself, that it would be easier once he was moving. It was the hour of the scullions. In the yard a boy dragged a rake across slush, and another went after him picking old hay and droppings into a wicker basket that looked far too big for him. In that light, Winterfell stones looked like a sleeping animal's flanks, cold and patient and impossibly old. Jon crossed the yard without hurry. Ghost's paws sank and rose, silent and neat, the proud lift of the head the only sign that the wolf was fully awake. Above, somewhere that his eyes could not see, a rook began to call, harsh and full of its own satisfaction. He turned toward the Godswood. The Godswood would be close and far in the same way it always was. You could cross a dozen courtyards and 2 bridges and descend a stair and walk a passage that was damp year-round, and then find yourself in a place no door had led to. The cold was alive there. The snow beneath the red leaves had a clean, dry squeak under boots. The air wrapped around the throat and brought tears to the eyes uninvited. Ghost moved ahead, pushing his face into the leafy drift under the weirwood and drawing it out dusted and almost pretty. The tree's pale trunk rose out of the mirrored surface of the pool as if it were both rooted and reflected at once. Jon had never seen the face in it as a man's face. It was neither kind nor severe, not his father's and not any god's he had been taught. It watched, that was all. It watched the way Winterfell watched. He knelt. Kneeling on Winter, stone bit into him and rightness came with the pain. It was not prayer he felt inside him, or at least not the kind spoken aloud. He let his breath slow until each in and out seemed deliberate, and then he set his hands on the cold trunk. It always shocked him that the bark felt like flesh. The first time he had recoiled, and then hated himself for recoiling. "I don't know if you listen," he said, in a voice low enough not to carry. "I don't even know if you care, but I would listen, if there were a voice." Ghost's head came up suddenly. The ears pricked forward. A gust skimmed the pond and broke the reflection into a spill of white and red. Somewhere a gate lifted and thudded into place, the sound less a clatter than a rumor of noise ferried through the trees. He thought, not for the first time, that every sound in the gods would had another sound beneath it, another root to it, like the way the old stones had walls beneath walls and those walls had cells beneath them where men had outlived usefulness and been left to the slow education of the dark. He waited for the quiet to tell him something, and when it told him nothing, he chose to call that an answer. By the time he returned to the center yard, the kitchens were awake. A black-haired girl came down the external stair from the bakehouse with a tray of loaves whom he knew by smell before he could see their shape. Dark crust, a gloss of something brushed over before they went into the heat. The fullness of the warm air around them touched his face with fat. The girl did not look at him. She was measuring her own steps. The loaves were heavy. He let her pass and then went inside, where more. Ning filled the long room between the hearths to a rough noise of voices. Men hunched around trenchers. A boy with a face like a rabbit's chewed with concentration. Gage swore at his own lad, and the lad swore under his breath back. Someone laughed. Ghost put his nose in the space above John's knee and waited as if there were no world but this one. "Bread," John said, and the word had the sound of request and of right both. Gage glanced up, and his glance softened and did not soften in the same instant. "You'll need more than bread, lad," the cook said. "Sit." He pushed a wooden bowl across the corner of his workboard. Onion and barley had been boiled down to something more like paste than soup, and then some kitchen cunning had restored it toward comfort. A slice of mutton laid along the top, thick with salt and hot with pepper. "You'll not be here for supper," Gage went on, and meant, he did not need to say, that such things were not easily altered. John ate with the discipline he used for every simple duty. One spoon after the other, bread used to clean the bowl neat when he was finished. He fed Ghost what he would, the lean meat nails trying and failing to pull back from the sharpness of the teeth. He knew without seeing when Arya came in. The scrape of her boot, the way her breath was already fast because she had run down a hall, the small hush that traveled through the room after her arrival. He did not turn his head until she elbowed him in the ribs and demanded to see the notch on Ghost's ear she had noticed 2 days ago and forgotten about since. "You're not going to run off now," she said, when she had pushed hair out of her eyes and decided the notch was still interesting enough to live. "Not without telling me." "Don't run in the kitchens," Gage shouted without force. "If I run now, they'll put me on a horse and I'll have to look solemn," Arya said to the room and to John at once. "Spar. After," John said. "Come to the yard when the sun is up enough to make Ser Roderick see where he's hitting." He wanted to tell her he had nothing to lose by being seen with her, that being told to go north had made him free in a small sharp way, free of most rules, if not the rules of his mind. He did not tell her anything. He looked at her, which was sometimes telling her enough. There were shadows under her eyes. She had not cried where anyone could see, but still the eyes knew. Outside, a pair of ravens hopped along the parapet, their feet keeping time with each other in a dance they had taught themselves. One tilted his head and watched John as if judging him from inside his hardly there throat of sound. The cold had a different flavor in the yard than it had in the godswood. Stone and smoke, iron wet from use. He found Maester Luwin where he always found him when he was not at a bedside or in a tower, in the passage between the armory and the great hall, intercepting life as it moved and nudging it where it would do least harm. The Maester's chain lay heavy along the line of his shoulders. When he turned, the lynx whispered. He took a look at John and then at Ghost and then back to John again, as men often did, and his mouth drew down as if in sympathy for pain John had not complained of. "How is Bran?" John asked. He could not keep the name out of his mouth any more than he could keep breath out of his lungs. "Any change?" "His breathing is strong," Luwin said, which was a way of answering without a gift. "The body holds to life with all its stubborn strength. If the body had a voice, it would tell us it is satisfied to be stubborn." He looked as if there was more he would say. Then he shifted his attention. "You are to see your uncle in the yard by the 2nd hour." "So they tell me," John said. "You came looking for me." John had not thought of it that way, but he did not say so. What would it take? He asked, and he did not know he would ask this until he heard the words in the air. For a man born on the wrong side of a parchment to be set right? He saw something change in Luwin then, a drawing in, not a recoil, but a kind of care taken in the placement of the feet. Ghost, who had been busy watching the ravens, turned his head as if he, too, recognized a moment when it arrived. It takes a king, Luwin said after a beat. Sometimes it takes a king and a lord together. Sometimes it takes blood on the ground and then a great deal of paper afterward. And the old way? John asked. Before parchment had so much weight. The old way, Luwin said dryly, was a banner and a hill and the men who showed up when you called them. Less elegant, more decisive. John should have laughed. He did not. Is there any precedent, he asked, for it here? In the north. Now Luwin's eyes truly sharpened. He had the look of a man who had suspected a sickness and now has it named. Your father knows the law, he said. He knows the weight of the name he bears and the bones that name is set on. He also knows the walls are only as strong as the men who trust the man who stands within them. Sometimes old houses have had to accommodate. The north is patient, but it is not very forgiving of men who ask it to forget itself. I'm not asking about walls, John said, and heard the lie in himself. He blew out breath. I'm asking about right. That is what I just answered, Luwin said, and for a moment the iron under the gentleness showed. He looked upward to where the hall's rafters met, as if a raven might pass with a letter in its beak. Do not mistake hunger for cause, John. You are not the first boy to look around him and see a place he was denied and find, in the heat of his face, a reason to claim it. But hunger is not cause, and even cause does not always bring wisdom. Why do you ask me? Because you do not lie, even when it would be kinder. And if I tell you that the kindest thing would be to go to your uncle and ride north and mean it, what will you tell me? That is what everyone tell. Es me, John said. It feels like hiding in a different direction. Luwin's mouth turned, not to a smile, but toward the thought of one. Your father said the same words to me once, he said, when he was younger than you are now. He did not go north then. He went to the Riverlands with a sword he had not yet learned to use properly, and a face he had not yet learned to keep from showing everything at once. The maester's voice had softened without his permission. He learned to use both. It did not make the world kinder. It did not make him less himself. John waited. Think before you pick something up, Luwin said. There are things you cannot set down again. Including a vow, John said. Very much including that. Ser Roderick's laugh carried across the yard before John saw him. That big, rolling sound, hair white as Yule's first snowfall and a beard like a relic from a story, made for warmth in a place that often pretended warmth was for southern folk. The practice yard had been cleared of its night skim of ice by boys with salt and shovels. Robb had already been there long enough to lose his first wind. He looked young and fierce, cheeks raw with cold and rank with exertion. Theon stood beyond them with a sword over his shoulder, and that crooked grin that always suggested he was telling a joke no one else was clever enough to laugh at yet. There is my stubborn brother, Robb called, turning in a way that betrayed the stiffness in his shoulder. Come, make me forget the morning. If I hit you hard enough, it will make you forget for days, John said. The banter came easier than breath. He liked Robb best in these early hours. No lordship hanging from his neck like a bell, no eyes on him but their own. They took up the blunted practice swords and went at it, each knowing the other's first three moves so well that it felt like an old dance. Only the steps changed a hair because the feel underfoot had changed and each boy had gotten stronger a fraction without the other realizing. Ghost sat in the snow nearby, ears forward, songless sentinel. Robb fainted and caught John high on the ribs. John let the pain inform him and did not let it own him, and reversed, catching Robb's blade with his and twisting, sliding in, using the closeness. They broke apart, breath pluming. You're not sleep enough to be kind, Robb said, pleased. When am I kind? John said. When you're not looking, Theon called. And only to girls and dogs. Wolves? Robb said, without looking at Theon. and something in his voice made Theon's next joke go unformed. They went at it again and then again until Ser Roderick called an end that did not invite argument. Robb was flushed and shivering and happy and held out his hand with the easy, half-awkward affection the North taught to those who would learn it. "You'll keep yourself whole for the road?" he said. "Do you want me broken?" Jon asked. "I want you where I can see you," Robb said, and at once it was a child speaking and not a future lord. The admission emptied him of some weight and added a different one in its place. He glanced down, embarrassed at his own honesty, and then up again, steady. "Sometimes I think it is all we do. Walk places where we can see each other." Theon rolled his shoulders. "Gods, be poets if you want," he said. "Only be quicker about it." He spun his sword once and balanced the blunt tip in the palm of his glove. "I'll say this for the Black, at least it's honest. No women, no inheritance, no lies about power. Only cold and steel and the hope you don't freeze your—" Ser Roderick cleared his throat in a way that said he had heard more than enough of Theon Greyjoy's thoughts for one morning. Jon rubbed at his ribs where the practiced sword had landed and felt the ache smile in his bones. He did not want to say what he was thinking. The thought would change when it left his mouth and become something else and then never change back. He said it anyway. "If a man were to belong here," he said quietly to Robb alone. "If a man were to say it aloud, could belonging itself make it true?" Robb's gaze moved across Jon's face as if he were reading a banner and not certain what it promised. "Belonging is what we do to one another," he said. "It is not a thing the stones hand down like bread. We are a house because we stand in it." "If you mean law." "I don't mean only law," Jon said. "But I mean that too." "The law is a blunt thing," Robb said. "It cuts or it doesn't. Father holds it like a whetstone. Lord of Winterfell does it as a man would do it who never asked to be that thing and never forgets that men better than he died to let him do it. If you are asking me to tell you that I would prefer you to me," he added, and the smile that came with the words was neither weak nor forced, "I will not say it. I like my own face too much. And you look very well in a cloak," Theon put in. Robb's expression firmed. "If you have a thing to ask," he said very quietly, only for Jon, "ask Father. Look at him and ask him. Don't ask me and don't ask men in kitchens. If you ask me, I will tell you we are brothers because we choose it every day. The rest is your fight to pick." Jon nodded without letting himself see it as refusal or permission. A gust shouldered through the yard and the noise from atop the gatehouse changed timbre. Chains over stone, men hauling, a crew at work. The king's party was a body with too many legs to stand still. It stirred even when it slept. Today it was waking to its full height. He could have gone to look. Bodies he barely knew moved through his mind with bright, worn edges. The king, large enough to seem a creature from the tales. The queen, beautiful as a polished weapon. The golden prince with a mouth too small to say anything generous. He had no need to add those images to himself again. Instead, he turned toward the tower with Bran in its quiet heart. He would not be let in. He knew that. He went anyway. Landing, his breath came harder. It was heat more than exertion. The corridor smelled like boiled linen and vinegar and a sweetness that was not truly sweet. A girl sat cross-legged outside the door with a basin between her knees, her eyes heavy-lidded from the boring work of watching water change temperature slowly. She glanced up and then down, and the muscles along her jaw worked once and then relaxed. He knocked. The door opened a finger's breadth only. Catelyn's face in the shadowed gap was whiter than it had been 3 days ago. He had never thought her pretty, and that thought was an ugly thing to notice, like noting the difference between two wines when there was no bread. Her eyes did not settle on him. They found his shoulder and a place beyond his ear and something in the air, and only last and hard did they meet his eyes. "I thought I had already thanked you for the blanket," she said. The words stuck to her mouth. They sounded like she had chewed them first. "You need not thank me," Jon said. "I only wanted to see him. For a moment." "For a moment?" she repeated, as if the words were an insult. The temper he had heard about and never seen had burned off into a bright particular. He understood now why men moved out of its way. Every breath is a moment. Each one is all I can count. You will not be here. I am here, he said, and felt at once the foolishness of it, the audacity. I do not want. He did not know how to finish that without confessing more than he had ever intended to admit to her. I do not want to leave the boy who is my brother to a room where I am not welcome, he could have said. I do not want to carry the shape of his hand away and have it never fit my own again. She lifted her chin. My son lies in this room, she said, and the words took on a cold that made him shiver. My son, he will not have your shadow across him now. Whatever you want will not be the thing that happens. He nodded. He could have begged. He did not. He stepped back, and the door closed with a gentleness that made something in his chest ache more than if she had slammed it. The girl outside the door did not look up again. He went down the stairs with the feeling that he had left a glove there and could not go back for it. By the time midday came near, the castle had become a machine with each gear in place. Men ran with torches to light slush-choked braziers where iron had stiffened from disuse. A skin of ice on a wash trough broke and floated like glass. Hullen's voice rose and fell at the stables. Horses stomped and called, and a groom hissed quiet at one into its ear as if sharing a secret. John went to the armory without a plan and found Micken at his anvil, the hammer ringing out a truth that did not change. The smith nodded without lifting his head, and John nodded back and let the singing iron work on him. When the hammer stopped, the quiet was jagged and wrong. He could not bear it long. It was later than he thought when he found Benjen by the stables. The day had grown a colorless kind of brightness that the north called noon. Benjen Stark was speaking to a man with a pack too finely patched to be called a beggar's. The man had a scar that ran from ear to collarbone and never quite broke the skin. When the words between them ended, the man went away with that shrugging gait particular to those who had carried their lives on their shoulders a long time and had learned not to resent the weight. Benjen saw John then, and his face did not change, which itself was an answer. You are ready? Benjen said. To say yes would be to give away something John had told no one. To say no would be to admit something he had not yet admitted to himself. He looked at the horse Hullen had chosen for him. A mare with a kind eye and the color of wood smoke, good legs, sound, and knew that a single movement would decide everything. No, he said. It startled him to hear it outside his head and have it still be true. No, uncle. I am not. Benjen blinked twice. I have seen men step backward from fear, he said, almost amused, almost kind in the way of a man who knows the world is rarely kind but will pretend when it can. I don't think this is that. It is not, John said. Ghost pressed against his thigh and then moved away, as if to give him a clear space in which to stand. I cannot go. I will not. The stable went quiet in the way only a public place can go quiet. A ripple began, and then the ripple told the next man not to speak, and then something in the air passed through the horseflesh and stilled it. Hullen put down a brush very carefully. A boy froze with a buckle in his hand. The mare blew out breath, and it was the sound of a bellows finishing its task. John had time to think how noiseless his own heart was, even now. Benjen's eyes went gentle in the way dying fire goes gentle. You're angry, he said. I am not angry, John said. Or perhaps I am. But anger is not the horse I am riding. I do not ride. I stand. He was aware that he spoke like a man telling a story inside a hall where no one was listening. It made the words less theatrical and more true. This is my home. It is where I belong. I do not say that because I have wanted it since I knew what wanting was. I say it because it is true regardless of what I want. The truth does not change the law, Benjen said, and his voice had turned. The kindness had retreated. The Stark in him came forward and stood. I ask you to hear me as my mother's brother, John said. He did not ordinarily give himself that shape. He wore the word bastard around himself like a simple wool cloak. To reach for a different garment now felt like theft and like taking back something that had been lent without permission. My life has been in these yards, and the cold of these stones is the cold that taught my fingers to feel. The man whose shadow makes Winterfell taller raised me and did not call me son, and somehow that has always made me love him more, not less. I will not swear to give away the thing that is me." Hullen's mouth opened and then closed. A horse's bit clinked against a rail. Benjen's hands went to the belt at his waist and then fell again. When he spoke, his words were not hard. They were only true. "You have no claim." "Then I claim," Jon said. And there it was, stripped of anything fine. A boy's announcement, a man's presumption, a thing people in the shadows of Winterfell would either laugh at or let it walk out of the stable and into the bigger air to see whether it could stand there without falling. "I am of Stark blood. I bear the look. I bear the name called as a curse by those who mistake ink for blood, and the name called as a blessing by those who know what it is to sit in a hall and hear the wind dragging at the shutters. If there is any right that the old gods know, I ask it." Benjen's eyes did not waver. "And if Robb asks his right? I do not set myself against him," Jon said, and felt the shape of those words as something he might not be able to bend later. "I do not dream of taking anything from him. I will fight whoever comes against him, and I will die here and be put into this ground so deep the roots find me. If the law says he takes the name and I take the road, I say the old way says I can stand on a stone and ask men to look at me and decide whether they see a wolf." "Do not romanticize men," Benjen said. "They will see only what their bellies tell them to see." "I know what their bellies are," Jon said. "I have eaten at their tables when I was a boy and the table was higher than my heart. I have fed their dog scraps and they have watched me to see whether I would keep something good for myself. They know what I am as well as you do." Benjen said nothing. The quiet between them filled with steam and hoof sounds and the very old smell of horse. Finally, he turned his head. "Hullen." "My lord," Hullen said. "Tell Ser Rodrik I'll be late." Hullen nodded as if he had been told that the day would be 1 hour shorter, and this was a thing he could not alter and would not waste fury on. Benjen faced Jon again. "If you choose a hill," he said, "you had better be sure it is high ground." "It is the only ground I know," Jon said. He heard his own simplicity and stood anyway. Benjen's mouth turned, not toward anger, but toward something like grief. "Your father is not a man to be cornered." "I will not corner him," Jon said. "I will kneel, but not to walls, to him. And I will ask him to look at me the way he looks at the truth inside his hand." The noise above the yard swelled. Men went to the windows. Pale banners unrolled and shook themselves of frost. A courier on a horse with legs like iron pounded across the hard-packed earth toward the inner gate and slid in the saddle and kept going like a man pursued by his own job. Jon was aware of time as a thing with little hands on it, pointing, eager. He stepped into the open air, and it felt like the first time he had stepped outside in the last 4 days. The sky had decided finally what to be. A white so tight it looked like something stretched on a frame. The courtyard stones had the look of stones that had been washed and put back down wrong and did not exactly fit anymore. Theon turned where he stood and looked at Jon and opened his mouth as if to shout something cutting, and then saw the way Jon walked and shut it again. Robb came forward as if he had been waiting at the edge of a field and had only just seen what was standing there beyond it. "Where is your horse?" he asked. "In the stable," Jon said. "Are you mad?" "Yes," Jon said and smiled without pleasure. "I might be." "Father is at the gate," Robb said, as if this were a thing that could stop other things from being true. Jon nodded. "Then I will go to him," he said, "and say this out loud once." Robb's face went through its boyhood and toward its manhood so quickly the change hurt to watch. "If you make a spectacle," he began, and then put up both hands, letting the warning fall flat between them. "No. You will do as you do." "Would you stand with me?" Jon asked. Surprised him to ask. It was a selfish thing. He asked it anyway. Robb blinked and then he nodded. Once, as if they were agreeing to jump from a ledge into deep water together and trust the shock to be bearable. "I will stand with you," he said, "and then we will see." They crossed the yard with Ghost pacing them like a second, pale shadow. Men noticed. Small folk noticed. A girl with a pail set it down and forgot it. Water slopped over the rim and made a bright, hard death of itself across her boots. The portcullis was drawn and the outer gate open. and in the winter glare beyond the threshold lay the beginning of the road south. The king's retinue had already begun to move, wagons creaking and curtained, men with pikes lined to either side to prevent children with curiosity or dogs with hunger from getting too close. Lord Eddard sat his horse square and brown-cloaked and neither grand nor humble. He looked the way the keep looked, unavoidable, obvious, solid as something that had never learned to move out of its own way in all its long life. Jon stepped into the space before him and went to his knee. The air went brittle. If the world had been sending signs, one would have come then. A rook would have fallen from the sky, or the weirwood would have spoken in a voice anyone could hear. Instead, there was the quiet that joints of would make when they bear great weight, and the particular way snow under a hoof creaks in response to change. He put his hand on his thigh and bowed his head and found that the stone beneath his knee was mercifully missing a jagged bit that would have dug into him cruelly. It made the position feel granted instead of stolen. "My lord," he said, and the words wanted to be father and would not be. Eddard Stark did not move his horse. He stared down as if mapping. "Rise," he said. "I cannot." "Then speak." "I have been told to go north," Jon said, which was a way of beginning a tale that could only end one way. "I have been told it by law and by love and by the fear of a strong woman whom I have given nothing to but pain. I will not go." He heard the intake of 100 breaths around him make a kind of rough music together. "I will stand here," Jon said, and if his voice shook, it was from the cold. "I will stand in Winterfell with my head bare for the wind and ask the north to look at me. If there is legitimacy that can be granted, I ask for it. If there is war that can be avoided by doing this thing, I ask that it be avoided. If you must say you have no son of mine to do it for me, say instead you have a young man raised in your hall who will die in your service and lead men when he is told, and put the word Stark on him in a way that is not a mockery." The breathing around him held, and then found itself again, rougher now. Ghost stood at his shoulder and made no sound. Jon had not looked up yet because he knew his father's face would tell him everything, and he was not certain he could lay that much truth inside his body without shattering. He looked up anyway. If Eddard Stark's face could be cruel in the way that steel can decide to cut through bone instead of stopping at it, Jon had never seen it. He did not see it now. What he saw was an old tiredness that belonged to mountains and to the sea. His father's eyes went over Jon's face the way a man's hand goes over the back of a horse when he is choosing to ride it and deciding whether his weight will do harm. He looked aside a fraction and saw Robb where Robb stood, legs braced, stubborn as the north itself, and some calculation there ended. "Stand up," Eddard said again. Not because he commanded, but because to kneel longer would turn the act into theater. Jon stood. His knee left the shape of its warmth on the stone for a second or two, and then the cold took it. "You would have me set the law aside before my king and my hall," Eddard said, and the way he said it was not accusatory. It was the articulation of fact, as a man might say the river runs north where it runs north in defiance of common sense. "I ask you to set me before it," Jon said. "You once told me the law belongs to men, not men to law." He heard the theft in that and flushed. He did not remember if his father had said those words or if Jon had wanted him to and had believed the wanting. "I ask for a name to match my bones." He looked around. Men on horses. The king's men. The north. He did not know if he would get to speak this long again. "If it cannot be done with parchment now," he said, "let it be done with a promise. If the king must put his hand to it later, let that be later. If the king refuses, let us see then whether the wish of Winterfell carries any weight at all with its own." The king's party had paused, as a beast pauses when something catches its interest. Robert Baratheon himself had turned in his saddle. He had a look like the head of a hammer and the humor of a man who had broken things and liked the sound they made. The queen had not bothered to look at all. Cersei's stillness felt like a knife laid on a table as a threat and then forgotten. It was Joffrey's face Jon saw next, pale as bread dough left too long near a fire. The boy's disdain hung off him as a garment. None of that mattered. What mattered was the face above him, bearded and human and suffering and full of a love that did not make decisions easier. "You want," Eddard Stark said, and it was almost wonderment. "You finally want." I have always wanted, Jon said, and now the tremor was there and would not go. I have taught wanting to look like other things. I do not any longer. There was a movement, then from the rear, where a man of middle height and pale hair dismounted. As if doing so were a courtesy, he offered his own bones. He walked in that careful, rolling way of those who had been born to a different alignment of force and had learned to negotiate with it. His face had mischief carved and then sanded into it. He stopped 2 paces short and leaned on nothing. "If the boy makes a speech," the pale man said, speaking not to Eddard but to the world, "we could at least give him a cup." Dry words scrape. He smiled, and somehow, of all the faces turned toward Jon, his was the least threatening and the least forgiving both. "Do you claim by right of blood?" His eyes flicked toward Lord Eddard and back to Jon's face again. "That can be a dangerous game. Ask any Targaryen." "My right is living here," Jon said. "Ah," the man said softly, almost as if to himself. "That right, the only one that ever matters." Eddard did not look at him. "Tyrion," he said, and the name held as much respect as a man gives a knife and as much distrust as a man gives a snake. Tyrion bowed a little and raised his brows and said nothing more. Lord Eddard turned, then toward the king. It was a long, slow turning, as if the motion itself weighed him. Robert Baratheon grunted and grinned and looked as if he wished for wine and a different weather. "Well?" the king asked. "What's a day without a mess? I had thought to ride. Perhaps I'll listen to a boy beg to be made a man. It will make stories for the road." Catelyn had come to the gate by then. Jon felt her arrival the way one feels the shift in a room when a fire's banked down. She had not put on a cloak. She had forgotten cold as a concept. Her eyes were on Eddard, not on Jon. She said nothing. He saw the shape of her fury and the struts that held it up. Fear and love and the feral need to keep what was hers from the teeth of anything else that might claim it. He understood her in a way that did not make him love her more. It made him excuse her for what she had to be, which is not the same as love. "I will not dishonor the law," Eddard said. "Nor will I begin a war in my own yard." He turned his head. "Jon, stand behind me." He had not expected that. It was not refusal. It was not acceptance. It was a position given in a fight, which men could argue was the same as everything and nothing. Jon stepped up and behind and to the side, where a son would stand in another world. The space there fit him. That fact alone felt like a wound. "Your Grace," Eddard said, his voice not rising and not softening. "This boy asks to be granted a name that matches what he is to this hall. He asks me to make a promise. I will. The law may catch up to me or not. If you deny me, I will abide by that. If you grant it, I will accept the weight. If you decline to mark it, I will do what I will in the north and answer for it later, as men like me have always done." A murmur went through the assembled. Jon did not breathe. He did not trust his body with breath. The king laughed. It was not cruel laughter. It was the laughter of a man who delights in the show of men being men. "By all my gods," Robert said. "You were always the stubborn one, Ned." He squinted down at Jon. "You look like trouble, boy." "I am," Jon said, and felt the audacity of it leave his mouth and circle back around to find him again. He did not take it back. Robert slapped a glove against his thigh and found that satisfying. "If I let Ned make a bastard into a what?" "A son," he said. "We'll have every lord asking me to make paper do their betting for them. There's law. There's sense. There's— Oh, leave off that face, Cersei." The queen's mouth had not moved. The king could feel complaint addressed to him the way a hound feels rain. "You may do as you like in your frozen halls," the queen said, cold and almost gentle, which was worse. "In the south we right the world so it holds still under our hands. In the north we live in it," Eddard said, not to her. To Jon, he said quietly, so only those near could hear, "There will be a reckoning for this, one way or another. Do you still wish it?" Jon opened his mouth and found that his voice was somewhere inside his chest and would not climb out without assistance. He used his will like a hook on it and pulled. "Yes," he said, and that yes was the first thing he had ever said that did not include apology. Robert had already lost interest in the troublesome parts of this discussion. "Gods," he said, "you Stark men and your ice water, I've a ride to begin. Do what you will. I will not put my name to it before I must, and perhaps I never will, and perhaps one day you will have to bring it to me with steel about it. Either way, ride with me, Ned. We are losing the morning." Eddard bowed his head. He did not need permission. He took it anyway. "As you say, your grace," he said. The animal that was the king's party began to move forward again, hoofs clattering and pikes shaking in the air like the thin winter trees. Joffrey leaned over to say something to the hound and got a curt word back that made him flush. The queen did not look at Jon and did not look at his father and did not look at her husband. For a terrifying second her gaze found Arya, who had slipped onto the perimeter of the yard and who met that gaze without the sense to fear it, and then Cersei looked away again, bored. Tyrion mounted with a wince and a self-mockery that made the wince a joke he owned. Eddard turned his horse and then half-turned back again, to face Jon. "You did this," he said, the words private in the middle of the yard. Not praise, not condemnation, the record of a fact that would change others. "You will not be able to take it back. Not from me, not from yourself. If we do this in the manner we must, you will call down eyes you do not like and you will be given loyalty you do not trust." "I know," Jon said. He did not, but he would. "You will go nowhere until I send for you," Eddard said. "You will speak to no one about this beyond those you already have put in your debt by telling them. You will keep to the keep. You will eat as if you wanted to go on living. You will see Maester Luwin. You will be kind to your sister," he added, and Jon knew which sister he meant because the ache on Eddard's face when he said it drew Catelyn's name in the air between them without him having to speak it. "You will let me do what needs doing." "I will," Jon said. "And you will not posture like a cock," Eddard said, the old hard humor coming back to him for a moment. "You will not stand on walls and dare the wind to take you. You will not make enemies for the sport of it. You will remember the North Watches as the gods do, without comment, without quick forgiveness." "I will," Jon said again. "Good," Eddard said. "I ride." And he did, and the world began in motion again. After, the place he had stood felt like an outline he had left behind him on the stones. Men avoided stepping there in that way men avoid stepping in a shadow they think belongs to someone of consequence. Robb came close and did not clap his shoulder because he knew that would make the moment into something it was not. They walked together toward the inner court where the wind did not quite dig its claws into you all the way through the cloak. Ghost walked between them. The people they passed put their eyes down or put their eyes on him in a way that meant they were measuring him for the first time. A boy of 10 with a gap where his teeth were growing and grinned at him unabashedly until his mother slapped him lightly on the back of the head for the rudeness of making anyone feel seen. In the smaller hall, the heat was higher and smoke had decided to settle in the rafters like a house cat. Gage had put a pie on the board for men returning from the gate, and the pastry had split at one seam and gravy had begun to weep out and run in a line toward the edge like a small black river under a winter moon. Jon looked at it hard as if a pie might give him counsel and then watched a knife go into it and felt oddly comforted when steam poured out and was caught in the light like a visible. "Isik," Arya found him again, wriggled past a man with a jug, and stared up into his face with her mouth half open, familiar as his own hand. "You did a thing," she said, absolutely delighted. "You made father say words that sounded different." Then fear came across her face, too quickly to hide. "Will they be angry?" "Yes," Jon said. "Some of them will. Some won't know how to feel and will be angrier at that. Some won't care at all unless it means they can eat more or less because of it." He put his palm on top of her head and felt hair that needed to be untangled. "Go to your lessons," he said. And the absurdity of the instruction made him grin because for a second, he sounded like someone who had social permission to tell her what to do. "Learn to stitch a thing together neatly." "I can stitch a sleeve," she said, fierce because she had to be. "And I can stick a pig." "I know," Jon said. "That is what I am worried about." She stuck her tongue out at him and fled. Her steps quick and light the way steps are when someone does not yet feel the weight of what has begun. The day moved on. It had the temerity to move on as if nothing had happened. Men unloaded sacks of oats from behind a wagon where the covering had torn and snow had gotten in. Ser Roderick shouted at a boy to keep his elbows close. A dog with half an ear chewed at a bone and growled at a smaller dog trying to lay claim to the spatter on the stone around it. The sun, such as it was, turned a little and made shadows shift their allegiances. If Winter had heard what Jon had said, it gave no sign of it. Maester Luwin came to him at noon with a sheaf of papers in his hands and a look that said he had found some trouble and was bringing it to Jon like a man who brings a hawk a rabbit. Not with guilt, but with duty. "You will read these," he said, "and then you will tell me what you think you have read, and then I will tell you what you have missed." Jon took the papers. They were heavy in a way that had nothing to do with ink. He did not smile. "Am I to be schooled like a boy then?" "You are a boy," Luwin said, not unkind, "and if you get your wish, you will need to be a better boy than you are. Better than most men have sense to hope to be. A lord who does not read is a blind man who thinks the wall can see for him." "I have never asked to be a lord," Jon said softly. "Then do not be one," Luwin said, and there was the iron again. "Do not seek it. Do not say things in courtyards. Do not make men listen to your voice. If you ask a thing, do not hide from the tasks that follow from it." Jon held the papers tighter. "I will not hide." "You already hid," Luwin said. "You hid in truth this morning. You hid so well that the truth did not notice. That is a kind of skill. I hope you will not have to use it often." "What do I do now?" Jon asked. The question shamed him. It was a boy's question. "You do what can be done," Luwin said. "You wait. You let Lord Stark do what the law lets him and what his conscience obliges him to do. You do not add to his burdens. You learn the sums that need remembering. You look at the stores. You speak to Hullen about hay and to Micken about iron and to the old woman who knows which herbs make a fever bleed. You do everything you can that will make you excellent in the tasks you are most likely to be asked to do, and some of those you will not. And you do not believe that because the God's wood is silent it is empty." Jon spread the papers over the table in the solar whose window looked down over the inner ward. Letters marched along lines in a tidy hand that looked nothing like the rough scrawl he had used at 10 to send a note to a boy 2 doors down and beg him to bring back a bit of honey cake from the kitchen. The numbers were the kind that made small noises in the head when he tried to hold them there. It pleased him, briefly and properly, to find that the records of grain were set in a rhythm that matched the weather, that the tally for meat was lower than it should be but not dangerously so, that there were 3 turnips in the cellars for every 1 onion, which seemed an injustice to the palate Winter demanded. He liked the feeling of the keep under his hands that the old words gave him. It was like walking the back corridors barefoot. He could imagine old lords and women who had been widowed twice and a steward whose name the walls had forgotten pushing the same marks into the same tables and feeling, as he did, that the act of doing so had something noble in it. Ghost lay with his head on his paws and watched him as if the wolf could read as well and was simply too civilized to say so aloud. He read until the light changed and the ink went stubbornly gray in places, and then he wrapped the papers in the cloth Luwin had provided and took them to the maester. "Good," Luwin said, and his face gave a ghost of pleased surprise. "You are not a fool." "Not entirely," Jon said. He wanted to go to the tower again and knock again and hear refusal again because repetition can be a kind of prayer. He did not go. When the dusk came, Winterfell put its winter cloak on to walk around its own edges. Lanterns were lit with the particular efficiency of men who would freeze if they did not do their tasks quickly. The smell of tallow and lamp oil made a low singing sound in the air without being a sound at all. Jon took himself down to the kennels where the dogs threw their bodies against wire and would enjoy at seeing him and sorrow at being restrained from showing it. He scratched the half-eared one in the soft place above the eye and got a lick on the wrist for his trouble, which is a kind of oath, he thought, and laughed once under his breath at the sentimentality of it. The hall at night had always been a place where the walls seemed to draw closer, but tonight they leaned in as if they, too, would hear what the walls had to say. Men talked quieter by the high board than they had 2 nights ago. Sansa sat with Septa Mordain, back straight as the length of a yardstick, her hair a careful miracle of pale. She glanced at Jon once and then away again, and it was not cruelty. It was a habit forming itself. Rickon, who disliked going to bed as much as he disliked porridge and strangers, ran under a table and giggled until someone caught him and made him sit on a bench. Robb was himself and someone else both. He ate and drank and laughed when he should, and when he thought no eyes were on him, he looked at the door and then other doors and then at the fire as if an answer might step out of it. Catelyn did not come down. No one made her. For the first time in a day and a half, Jon let himself think of her without flinching. He thought, with sudden piercing clarity, that she had built a tower of her hurt and her anger and retreated to it not because she despised him but because she did not have a way to do all the things required of her at once. He did not forgive her. He did not hate her. He let the thought be and let it be complicated and let it sit beside the other things in him. When the meal was done and the benches pulled back and the floor swept, so many tasks fell to invisible hands, and yet you could hear them if you listened. The castle let out a breath it had been holding. Jon went again to the Godswood. He had already been told by Luwin with a glance that he should not be seen to go there too often today, that men would make patterns out of anything if they were given enough angles to look at it from, but he went anyway because there are rules and there are things that will not be refused. The sky above the Godswood was a clean, black bowl. Stars had come out early in the kind of cold that invited them. He knelt again, warmed his knee at that same blessed flat place on the stone, and laid his hand on the bark. "I did it," he said. He did not feel silly. "If you had something to do with it, if you threw your shadow around men's ears and made them sleep so the words could pass by, then I thank you. If you did not, then hear me anyway, because sometimes it is enough to be heard." Ghost, who had ranged and returned, sat with a piece of stick between his paws and killed it slowly and with concentration. Jon put out his free hand without looking, and Ghost's warmth came to it, which is a kind of grace. He stayed until the cold took his fingertips and made them burn through his gloves, and the wind made his nose run, and the memories of scented herbs in a sick room knocked their small knocks in the back of his head. Then he rose and went back through the passages to the keep, where his room waited with the pallet he had come to love, because it always felt like a punishment that had been chosen instead of imposed. Sleep did not take him at once. He lay with his arm over his eyes and listened to the stones working. Every building makes its own noise when the day has taken from it and the night has not yet let it rest. He thought of the morning's choice and the afternoon's papers and the evening's cold. He thought, because he could not stop himself, of Ned Stark's face looking down at him from a horse and the weight in it that made the breath leave Jon's body once and return with difficulty. He thought, "I will have to be the kind of man who does not make his father ashamed." He thought, "I will have to be the kind of man who does not make his brother my enemy." He turned onto his side. Ghost sighed, a low huff that was too steady to be called complaint, and put his muzzle against Jon's calf. Sleep came then, as it always did after Ghost had put him into the world's proper place with his body. A white animal, a boy, a bed, a keep, the north, the stars above the Godswood, the impossible old face on the tree. He woke before dawn. He woke because things had to be done, and because when you have pulled a thread you must now begin to wind it around something careful lest the whole garment turn to a tangle. In the gray hour, when the east was only a lighter shade of the night, he went to the tower with the sick room and stood at the bottom of the steps and did not climb. He felt no heroism in self-denial. He felt only obedience to his own word not to make a nuisance of his grief to a woman already drowning in hers. He turned and went to the storage rooms with their little doors and oil lamps hung on hooks inside to keep hands steady as they counted. He counted sacks. He asked questions about cheese. He learned the names of 3 women who could wake a field full of sleeping men with a shout that would turn their dreams into duty. He took that knowledge into himself the way a man takes salt, without joy but with a sense of necessity. At noon, Robb found him with a list in his hand and a new smudge of ink on the cuff of his shirt. "Luwin says you've been good," Robb said, and the boy in him peeked out in pleased surprise at this little flattery as if it were a sweet. "Luwin says a great many things," Jon said. He had not realized until yesterday how much the maester could hold in himself without breaking. He wondered whether Luwin had ever asked anything for himself in a yard under the eye of a king. He wondered whether it had been given. "He says you are to come to the hall when the bell strikes," Robb said. "What? Just do it," Robb said. "And don't look like you'll be sick. It will make the old ones nervous." So Jon went to the hall when the long, mournful bell shook the air and made the wolves in the kennels answer, and he stood not at the bottom of the steps to the dais and not on the dais itself, but at the place where messengers are received and men who have common petitions speak and leave. A thin beam of light made from glass warped and window smallness struck the floor and set a shape there like the blade of a sword. He was aware of every breath in his body and of the fact that there were hairs on his neck and of the foolishness of thinking of hairs on necks when a hall sits like a mouth waiting to bite. Then the door at the side opened and Catelyn Stark entered, and at her back, with a gait that was both careful and natural to him and a face open toward the world as if it were a new thing, walked Bran. He did not run. He did not need to be told not to run. His body simply understood that if he moved too fast the sight would blur and he would lose the gift of the whole of it. Bran walked slowly, guided by a patient hand under his elbow, Hodder's dear Hodder, whose name fit him so neatly it seemed cruel to say it. Bran's face, which had been a story told by other mouths for a week, now told its own story. That waking had been like breaking a seal, and finding the letter inside was both an instruction and a riddle. He looked toward Jon, and something clear and fierce came into his eyes. Jon did not remember moving, and yet he found his feet carrying him forward until he stood with his hands at his sides, empty and dangerous. "You were there," Bran said with absolute certainty. "I knew you were there." "I was not," Jon said, because truth mattered in the moments when it would cost. "I was sent away, but I was near." To call the nearness what it felt like would be to strip bark and leave no tree. He swallowed. "I will be near every day hereafter," he said. Bran nodded as if setting terms. "Good," he said, and the little force of that single syllable made Jon's knees want to find the blessed flat place on the stone at the godswood, and he forbade them. Catelyn stood quiet while this exchange happened, and then she looked at Jon. "If you will excuse me," she said, into the hall, into the air, to no one in particular, and the words learned the trick of politeness and managed somehow to shift themselves into something else before they reached Jon's ears. He bowed because that was what a man would do, and because it is sometimes kinder to fill the ritual than to leave it empty. After that, the day unfolded like a firm hand. Luwin showed him where the old lists differed from the new, and when it mattered and when you let it pass and why. Ser Rodrik worried about boots for the men on patrol and did not recognize he was worrying until Jon said, "I will go to Mikken with you," and Ser Rodrik said, "Thank you," and then, "Yes," as if the thank you had been an experiment that had gone well. Arya cut off a piece of her own hair with a knife she was not meant to have and did not notice until Sansa cried a horrified oath. And then Arya laughed and ran, and Jon had to reach and catch her by the sleeve and pull her into a shadow and talk to her very quietly about the merits of stealth. Theon, who had made a show of being above all this, whispered something to a girl who did not bother to hide her amusement when she refused him, and then saw Jon watching and reddened and scowled and said aloud in a voice that carried, "Well, our bastard thinks himself a prince now." And Jon let the words pass as if they were so much smoke that had decided to go to the rafters. At dusk, as the sky made the subtle change that told a Northman exactly how cold his hands would be if he took the gloves off after this hour, a raven came to the mews with its chest puffed high with pride. The bird, rangy, arrogant, took an extra circle around the keep as if to be sure it had the full attention of anyone who cared for such things, and then landed with a clatter and a rattle and the sound of wings like a curtain pulled suddenly. The man at the mews shouted for the maester. Luwin went, of course, and Jon went with him as if he had always run at the edge of that man's cloak. The message was short, written in a hand that would have embarrassed less courageous eyes into neatness. Luwin read it and did not sigh and did not blink more than was necessary. "What?" Jon asked. "A promise," Luwin said. "From where?" "From the road," Luwin said. He handed Jon the bit of parchment. It contained what could not yet contain everything. The king had declined to mark anything with his hand. Lord Eddard would do what he must and answer for it later. There were no names and no titles written there. There was ice somehow there behind the letters. It was a kind of love that did not confess itself. John traced the letters and then folded the thing carefully and handed it back without being asked to be careful. "So it is begun," he said. "It was begun this morning," Luwin said. "Or it was begun when you were small and a woman who did not love you equally to her own children allowed you to live in a keep whose walls were old enough to know better than any of us how to hold more than they were meant to hold. Or it was begun when the first Stark rode his first wolf. You see the difficulty in deciding when a thread begins." John smiled despite himself. "You are very wise. I am merely a man who has been allowed to watch a long time," Luwin said. "You will be wise if you do not think watching is an insult." He left John with Ghost at his knee and the weight of paper tucked under his ribs where words go when they would do harm if carried in the mouth. The night proved itself colder. The stars were crueler in that they were clearer. Somewhere a child had started a sob that would be soothed before it had sighs to it. Somewhere an old woman put her hand on the old scar on her knee and decided tomorrow would be a day to bind it warmer. Ghost lifted his head toward the north and then toward the east and then, with an odd, almost embarrassed delicacy, toward the south. John bent, laid his hand on the wolf's head, and felt, through fur, through skin, through bone, through the old, beautiful machinery of an animal's body, the steady thud of a life that did not calculate. "I will not go," he said, almost out of habit now, as if the gods would needed repetition to make an idea stick. "I will stand. If it requires fighting, I will fight. If it requires learning, I will learn until my eyes bleed. If it requires patience." Here he smiled in the dar. At the arrogance of his own vow. "I will try." Ghost gave him the flat, unimpressed look that animals reserve for the pride of men. It warmed him better than a cloak. Far away, the king's party would be bedding down and cursing a wind that found its way over every hill. Closer, in the tower room, a woman would be asleep in a chair and then wake and then sleep again, and a boy would dream that he had climbed a tree and the tree had bent down and lifted him to the moon and then set him back again while telling him secrets in a voice like leaves. In the yard, a man would scratch in the snow with a stick and draw a wolf's head without meaning to and then kick it away so no one would say he fancied himself an artist. Every stone held heat like a miser and let it go reluctantly. The day had taken up its burden and gone to ground. The night watched with an old and patient regard. John stood in the dark until he shivered and then stood a little longer because there was pride in refusing the body for a few more heartbeats. He went finally to his room and lay down and slept without dreaming. Or if he dreamed, the dreams were of such use to him that they left no image behind to distract him from what morning would require. Morning required that he write. He had never liked writing much. His hand cramped quickly and ink believed itself to have business with his sleeves that could not be postponed. He wrote anyway. He wrote a letter to his father he did not need to send, and one to his uncle he did, and two more to men whose names he would learn to say with a shape that implied he knew what they commanded and what they feared. The great John, who thought the first answer to any question was to make a bigger voice, and Lady Mormont, whose letters had the sharpness of a spear and the accuracy. He wrote in the manner Luwin taught him and then put the quill down and thought and then took it up again and scraped away a word and replaced it with another. He did this until sweat lay fine along his lip and his back hurt from the bend. Ghost slept in the curve of his foot like a hearth the world could not get at unless it came through him. He went to Micken and held tongs with him and learned more about the way iron speaks when it is just wrong and when it is about to be right. He went to the kennels and let the new bitch who had not yet chosen to like anyone else stand in the doorway sniffing him for a long time while he spoke to her about nothing, and then sat on the cold floor and did not move until she came to put her nose in his armpit and sighed. He went to the men who had drill at the wall and made his own sword find its place in his hand the way you put your tongue against a sore tooth to know whether it is better or worse. He did not go to the tower room and he did not go to the godswood and he did not call attention to himself and he did not forget to be noticed. He was learning the work of a man who has asked for more than he knows how to carry. When night fell again, he found the flat place on the stone in the godswood and kneeled as if he had never stood. And if the face on the tree watched him with that same old non-judgment, it was enough. He spoke his vow again, not to men or to law or to blood, but to a place. After the third day, a rider came through the snow with a face that had been chapped into nobility by the wind and clothes that talked about distance. The rider stood in the yard swaying a little with fatigue and then straightened and asked for Jon Snow with an insult certainty, which is to say the certainty of one who has never had to doubt himself. "I am he," Jon said. The rider reached inside his coat and pulled out a piece of wood with marks cut into it that were not letters and were of a kind nonetheless. A message from the mountain, from a hall that did not keep a maester but kept its memory in oak. The marks said, "We hear you." The marks said, "What claim you make, we will not spit on it before we have heard it." The marks said, "We remember the old way and will listen with our hands on our swords and our eyes on the mouths that speak." Jon closed his hand around the wood and felt a door open in himself that he had not tracked the construction of. He knew then that the thing he had chosen to do would not be able to be done quietly. The North would answer as a choir does. Some voices loud, some only mouths open on sound, some voices proud and some sour with old injury and old hunger. He would need to be worthy of their listening. He would need to be worthy of the man whose look from a horse had asked him whether he was sure. "I hear you," he said to the rider, because a message should be treated like a gift and a weapon both. Then he went to the hall and set the bit of wood on the table where papers went to become action and sails went to become voyages. He laid his palm flat beside it. Ghost put his head on Jon's foot and breathed the same air he breathed and made no show of guarding him and guarded him perfectly. Winterfell watched. The gods would watched. The old gods watched. The young gods who had been brought north and made to settle on cold mantles watched with patience born of a different tradition. Men watched in the way that was their own. Badly and well and with their own lives pressed up against their eyes like a boy pressing his face to the crack in a door to see what his elders are saying about him. Jon stood and understood that the waiting he had asked for would be a kind of battle no sword would help him fight. He found he was not afraid. He found he was something that holds still in the wind. He had no right to it. He held it anyway,